Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and I will choose chocolate over sour candy any day of the week. Okay, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey everybody, it is me, I'm Raymond. I'm back, as always, your host here on the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today's interview is a good one. I'm going to try something new where we're pretty much just going to hop right into the interview today. But first, I did want to talk about the Facebook group. The Facebook group is growing, okay? The Facebook group is the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, which if you want to join, you can just search Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast, and you can find the Facebook group there. It has become a place where people can come. They can share their photos, they can ask questions, and it's a safe place for them to do so. A lot of people have shown up and admittedly said that they had no intention of sharing, but just kind of creeping in the background. But after seeing how the group reacts and responds and how kind of welcoming it is, they felt open enough to share their photos and ask for critiques and be more involved and in turn learned more things about photography just in a much quicker sense. And it's been wonderful to see everybody in the group growing as photographers. So if you want to join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, I would welcome you to come on in. Again, just search Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast and you will see a link or the option to join the group. I got 3 questions for you though, and once you answer them and confirm that you are a human, you are allowed in. And if you don't answer those 3 questions, I will not let you in. It is that simple. There you go. So, all right, guys, we're going to get into today's interview with Cory Potter. Now, if that name sounds familiar, he was back. He was on the podcast back 2 years ago. I cannot believe it's been 2 years since I talked to Cory. Cory is just an SEO master. This guy knows his stuff when it comes to SEO. And what I love about Cory's approach is that it is no nonsense. It is not like you do this one thing, you're going to the top of Google. What he says is actionable tips. And what I hope that you get out of this interview is that SEO is not one size fits all. It is not, you just do this one thing and you're good. You really do have to put in a lot of work to rank well in Google and within SEO. So don't think that SEO is going to be something that is going to take you and transform, your website overnight, because it's not. I've been working on it for years. Cory's been working on it for years, and it always changes. So it takes time. But once you get down the fundamentals, like Cory is going to talk about today, you're setting yourself up for just the right path. So now, as always, there's 2 parts. There's 2 versions of this episode. There's a free version and then a version for premium members. Premium members get access to the information that is more geared towards business and more actionable tips that they can put into their business websites today. So there's going to be a break. If you're listening to the free version, there's a break, and then after the break, it goes back into the rest of the interview with Cory. So once you hear that break, don't, go find another podcast, because there's still more information after the break. Like what Cory shares is definitely some of the content that Google wants to see specifically from photographers. So don't leave at the break. But premium members today are going to hear a wealth of extra information. Things like how often they should be blogging, why having a plan in place after you hit publish on a blog is important and what that plan should look like, how to do keyword research, and the one blog post every photographer should have on their website to get them more business. So that's it. We're going to get on into this interview right now with Cory Potter. Today's return guest is Cory Potter, photographer turned SEO master, focusing on helping photographers understand search engine optimization and providing an incredible amount of help. Cory is here today to talk about mistakes that photographers make when blogging. Cory, man, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, when I was doing research for this episode, I looked back to the last time that you were on, and it was actually 2 years ago next week, the
That's crazy. I
27th.
know I saw the recording because that it got shared recently, and I was watching it. And I was like, "Whoa!" I was still in my old office at my old desk. It's like been so long.
I know it was 2 houses ago for me.
Yeah,
2 houses ago.
that's
It's just
crazy.
ridiculous to when you think about how long you've kind of been doing something, when you're just kind of in it day in and day out. When things change, you don't even recognize it. So
And look at that studio you've got now. You had your bed in the background in the other one.
I did. I know it's kind of embarrassing to think about. Now I got like Wi-Fi lights that I can turn on and off with this cool little switch here. You can change that color in the background, pink. No, we're gonna go back to blue. But yeah, no, this is it's definitely a new setup. It's definitely a whole lot of fun, and I'm excited to get in and talk to you today because obviously blogging is kind of one of those things to where I think when you first get started, you're like, yes, like I'm gonna have a website. It's gonna be so much fun, and then you realize immediately that, oh wait, I'm not getting the leads that I wanted to. What do I need to be doing? And then people think, oh, maybe I should start blogging, and then they start blogging client sessions, and then they don't know what to do after that. So today I know that you're going to share a ton of great information, but before I start asking questions, I want to know, is all the info that you're going to share today, does it matter if does it matter what website platform we're using, and our free options like Wix? Okay, and when should people consider upgrading?
Yeah, so I mean, it does matter. So that's one of these things where a lot of people are telling everyone Google's platform agnostic. It doesn't really matter. And like to some extent, that's like got an element of truth to it, but it's not really true. And the thing is, if you think about like a camera and a lens, if you said, does it matter which lens I use? Well, I mean, you can still take pictures no matter which lens you use, right? But it absolutely matters which lens you use. It's going to change how your perspective when you look through the camera. It's going to change the compression. It's going to change all kinds of things are going to change depending on which lens you put on your camera. It's the same thing with the website platform. It's like if you use any lens, you'll be able to take a picture. If you use any platform, you'll be able to build a website. You can potentially rank in Google, but there's going to be some that are the right website for the right job. And that's why I don't like, it's hard to recommend one specific platform because there are a lot of different applications. There are people who want to do volume sports and need like a proofing system for lots of different people. There are people who do wedding and portrait photography who need, more of a portfolio website. And there are a lot of different options out there. But as far as blogging goes, WordPress is the king of blogging. Absolutely. Like that's why it was invented long ago. And there are other platforms where you can blog. Squarespace is an example. Squarespace's blogging platform doesn't even compare to the power of WordPress's blogging platform, but you can do it and you can rank blog posts on Squarespace. And, there are several others like Showit uses WordPress for the blogging side. But if you're talking about PhotoBiz, if you're talking about Zenfolio, they have blog options, but their blog options are very limited, extremely difficult to export if you ever want to grow. Technically, they have lots of problems with how the pages are indexed and all kinds of things that have to do with more of the technical side of SEO. So I would say like the three platforms that I feel are the best to use if you're planning on blogging are going to be WordPress, absolutely number one. Showit, I kind of give them a pass because they use WordPress for the blog side. And then Squarespace, if you have to, you can get away with a blog on Squarespace. If you don't have one of those, you probably should upgrade before you put a lot of effort into blogging.
That's good to know. As somebody who uses Squarespace and as somebody who has said that they're going to switch to WordPress from Squarespace for the past 2 years and has not, I can tell you that I've definitely encountered a lot of those limitations when it comes to blogging, and it can be frustrating. So it's good to hear that that other options might work better. But I really like that analogy between the camera and the lens. That's something that I never have thought of before. And as somebody who's like not an expert on the computer side of things, I really appreciate you having knowledge of both and being able to make that very clear and understandable. But I mentioned maybe I realized that maybe a lot of people haven't been listening to the podcast for 2+ years, and maybe they didn't hear your first interview. So even though I gave you that introduction, can you kind of share how you got started? Because like I said, you were a photographer turned SEO master. Can you talk about how you got into photography and then the transition as well.
Sure. I mean, when I got into photography, it was mostly just, I had no idea. It's funny. It really started with a Google search. That's so ironic. I never made that connection until just now. But my wife said we needed to have an engagement session or engagement photos. And I was like, that sounds ridiculous. I've never heard of that. No one does that. She's like, yeah, it's really a thing. And I was like, okay, I'll go to Google and search for engagement photography or whatever. And I did. And I looked at some photographers locally who were doing engagement sessions. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like this. This is cool how they're telling stories and showing connections and relationships. And I was like, well, I'll send a few emails. So I sent some emails and I connected with a photographer who actually needed an assistant at the time. Then this was like 10, 11 years ago. So it wasn't like everyone's emailing photographers for assistance all the time like it is now. And so she was like, I really need someone to help. Are you interested? And I was like, sure. I don't have a camera. She's like, you can use mine. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I went to a few weddings and I was an assistant and I just picked it up really fast and got into wedding photography. I was going to do another business. I was actually doing SEO and websites before then. And I'm like, this is a great business. And I just built a wedding photography business really quickly. I think having a WordPress website before most people did, but everybody else was still using Flash websites, and being able to optimize it pretty well because of my knowledge of that space had a huge impact on being able to grow the business really fast at that time. And so that's what I did a wedding photography business for about 8 or 9 years. And then we had 3 kids and I was like, well, not sure I want to do 40 weddings a year. And my wife wanted to spend more time taking care of the kids and she wasn't able to help with some of the day-to-day stuff. So I was like, I need to build a business that I can grow myself and scale with a team. And that was just better for our family. So that's where I am now.
I love it. So are you still shooting weddings? I'm
not. The only thing I'm doing right now, I sold all of my Canon gear and I bought an Olympus OMD whatever something Mark II. It's like a really nice mirrorless camera that I'm using for vlogging, taking pictures of the family, all that kind of stuff. I'm excited about that part of photography again, actually getting more into video and kind of like how does photography relate to video. That's been really fun.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I focused on a lot in 2018 as well, and it all came from the GoPro. I swear, if people are like listening to this, they're gonna think that like everything that I talk about is just like a giant GoPro ad. But no, honestly, like the GoPro is just kind of made. You know,
GoPro.
There you go. I look at like my cameras as like this professional work, you know, and it's hard for me to separate them between like, oh, I'll do personal stuff here with. And then do professional stuff here still with the camera. And I found that the GoPro for me, at least as like a working professional who uses cameras day to day, it's just really fun. You can throw it in your pocket. You never have to worry about it. You know, everybody's always worried about like the best camera bag and protection for their expensive cameras. And the GoPro, I just throw it right in my pocket and it does everything. It's so much fun. And then the software on top of it just takes care of all the editing. I don't have to do anything, which is the best part for sure. That was supposed to be a segue. What's that?
So buy a GoPro. End of
yeah. I was trying to think of how that could be a segue to get back into like technology and software and blogging. But I couldn't think of anything right there the last second. So we'll just end it there. But today we are talking about blogging. And that's obviously a topic that a lot of photographers, maybe those specifically listening to this podcast, are going to look at negatively. I remember when I first started, you know, there's that idea that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but it's really not, right? Especially like today's day and age. I mean, it can, but chances are yours are not going to be worth 1,000 words. So blogging is going to help us get found. It's going to help us get new clients. It's going to help us grow as photographers. So let's kind of talk about from your side of the table, why is blogging so important for photographers?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you right off the bat that blogging, there's kind of a misconception about what blogging actually means. So there are different definitions that you could apply to blogging. And I think that it kind of depends on how you're looking at it. That could really influence your preconception of like, is this a negative thing? Do I hate it or do I love it? Where when I say blogging is important, what I mean is creating new relevant content to people who are looking to hire you. That's important, right? But if it's like keeping a personal photo journal on your website, if that's what you consider blogging, that's probably not as important. So I think it's hard because people have this idea of blogging. They think of someone like, this is kind of an old example, but I think of like Caitlin James, whenever she was blogging, 5 times a week for 8 years in a row, like hardly missing a day. And that was like an example of extreme. I'm a blogger who, I'm a photographer who's a blogger. Like that's real blogging. But there's also using your website to create new content. And it doesn't have to be in blog format, but a blog is important because it's an easy and natural tool to create new content. So you can just easily take, whether it's a client session or a set of tips or whatever, and post it on your blog in a way that feels natural and easy. And it automatically is new content that can be indexed and make your site more relevant.
So when you say there that posting things like tips for clients to potentially find us, that's important. Posting like a personal photo blog, that's not so important. When you say those things are or are not important, are you speaking specifically to Google or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's really good because there's so many different reasons that you may want to blog. And I think that's one big mistake that photographers have is they think, I'm going to blog, I hate it, but I'm going to do it because it's good for SEO. Yeah. And that is not always the case. Hang on 1 second here. I need to turn off these notifications. Sorry.
No, that's fine. They can get pesky, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I find that too. It's like you're in the zone, like you're having this nice conversation. We got eye contact, and all of a sudden something pops up. It's like, Mark replied to your. Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, yeah. So I guess whenever people blog only for SEO, they are forgetting about all the other potential good reasons that you could blog. So I mentioned already, like one of the most important things is that you're creating new important content. We'll call it Cornerstone content. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you could also create content to support your Cornerstone content. You can create natural local relevance. You can network with venues, vendors. I've got some notes here. So we can network with venues, vendors, local entities, feature your clients, be seen as an authority, show potential clients consistency and variety, show that you're in demand, develop a style and voice. Like there's so many reasons that you might blog. And actually I was at a talk at Imaging last year, and this guy was talking about how blogging changed his life. And if you've probably heard of Seth Godin. Yes. He has said like blogging is one of the most important things you can do for personal development. He has a blog where he blogs something every day, I think. And so there is this idea that like a personal blog can help you to understand yourself and why you're a photographer and what your style is. And for beginner photographers, it could be that using your blog to put into words the reason that you're taking pictures could have a huge impact on growing as a photographer that people admire, not only for your photos, but also for what you believe. So there is value in that kind of personal blogging. But when I'm talking about it's not as important, I'm talking about for SEO. So when it comes to search engine optimization, a lot of people think if I blog once a week, that's going to help me have better rankings automatically. And that's just not true.
Currently what I think. So yeah. I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. And it goes around a lot where like, if you have a lot of frequent updates, Google loves fresh content, kind of. Like Google does potentially like fresh content for certain queries. For most photographers, that's just not something that's going to have any impact on ranking. So the thing is, like if you're just blogging frequently because you think it's good for Google, it's probably not helping you. Now, to some extreme, it's like it's not important until it is. And that's kind of how it is with a lot of things with SEO. Like if you stop blogging and haven't blogged for 3 years, it's probably going to have some impact on your overall ranking. Maybe, but there's a lot of there's side effects. I feel like I'm going like all over the place, but there's side effects to blogging regularly. And those go back into some of those reasons that I said earlier. But whenever you blog regularly, you are showing that you're in demand. You're putting out more work that can build momentum. People are sharing it. People are linking to it, all of this kind of stuff. So it's not like you shouldn't blog, at some rhythm. I think that rhythm is important. And I typically recommend to people make it at least 4 times per year. That's the bare minimum. But then I recommend at least once per month putting out some kind of relevant content. And then if you have other things to fill it in, like you have client work, like I said earlier, sometimes you're building content just to support your big Cornerstone content.
Okay, so that's a great segue into what Cornerstone content is. If the bare minimum is to blog 4 times a year, I'm assuming that those 4 blogs need to be really important. And
Exactly.
is that what we talk about when we're talking about Cornerstone content?
Yeah, it is. And keep in mind that those 4 pieces of content don't necessarily have to be blog posts. A lot of people get caught up. Is it a page or a post? It doesn't really matter to a search engine. On most platforms, a page and a post are treated exactly the same way by a search engine. Maybe on some platforms that may not be the case. On the ones I mentioned earlier, the important ones, it's all the same. So if you make it a page on your site or a post on your site, it's still a piece of Cornerstone content if it meets this requirement. Basically, let's give it a little bit of backstory. Why is there Cornerstone content? So Google only wants to show one result per domain for a particular query. Now, there may be some cases people are like, oh, no, I've got 2 results on the first page. It can happen. Like, you can get 2 results from your domain for some queries, especially if they're not very competitive, or if you are like an extreme authority, like you've taken over that query. Query being just something that someone is searching for. So Google wants to show one result per domain. They want to vary it up. They want to make sure it's fair. No one can have a monopoly and have like 100 pages on their site about a topic and take the first 10 pages of Google search. That would be ridiculous, right? So typically they want to show one result per domain. So if Google came to you and they said, hey, Raymond, I know you're an authority about wedding photography in Indianapolis, but we want to show just one page of your site whenever someone types in wedding photographer Indianapolis. Which one would you like us to show? And you had to answer with one single page. And you're thinking about, hey, someone is out there searching for wedding photographer Indianapolis. What do they want to know? And where does that information live on my site? And what page would serve their intent? And that's whatever page you answer with to Google, that's your Cornerstone content.
So like my homepage is Cornerstone content. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Your homepage can be Cornerstone content. And usually for photographers, it makes sense for your homepage to be the biggest piece of Cornerstone content for your biggest term. It gets complicated because a lot of people have multiple specialties, and putting all of that on your homepage doesn't always make sense. But you could have an internal page for families. So our hatfieldphotography.com/family, and that could be the Cornerstone page for families. Or you could have a blog post about the top 10 wedding venues in Indianapolis, and that could be a piece of Cornerstone content when someone is searching for wedding venues in Indianapolis, places to get married in Indianapolis, or terms like that.
Okay, cool. So I understand that now Cornerstone content is obviously very important. And I liked, once again, your analogy of thinking of Google coming to me and saying, hey, if somebody were to search for this one thing, what would you show them? Because that does kind of change things up a bit. I think I've kind of had this idea, since I don't know how it looks behind the curtain, I just kind of do a lot of guessing, I guess.
Yeah.
And one of those things is, well, if I just put out more content on various topics, then one of those is going to be bound to be found a lot in Google. It's going to start ranking, and then I can put more effort into that. But there has to be a more efficient way than putting out hundreds of pieces of content every year and just hoping that one of them sticks. What do you suggest for that?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And honestly, it's one of those things where if you have professional grade tools, it makes it a little bit easier. There are tools out there, like what I use, Ahrefs is a tool where I can do all kinds of research on competitors, find out what they're ranking for, find out which pages on their site are performing the best for them, get a list of topics that way. But if you don't have that kind of thing, you can still do manual research where you go to Google, you type in a phrase. Let's say I just want to go after a bigger phrase like wedding photographer Indianapolis. Well, if I just go to Google and type that in, Google's going to give me a lot of clues about what kinds of things I should cover on that topic. It's going to have potentially suggested searches at the bottom. It might have an autofill suggestion at the top. It might have websites that are not necessarily home pages that have information that I can go and look and see, why is this page ranking? There's a lot of that kind of like competitive analysis and just regular SERP, like search engine result page analysis, that I can do to figure out what Google wants to show. I think that's a good thing. I really do think that it comes down to being an expert in your industry and knowing what your clients want. So one good thing you can do is look back at your emails, look back at your consultations and say, what are people asking me over and over again? And how can I write something authoritative and comprehensive on that question? I know for me, whenever I did consults a lot as a wedding photographer, a lot of my clients were like, we don't know where we want to do an engagement session. We know we want to do engagement photos. We have no idea. Can you make some suggestions? So guess what I did? I made a blog post that was 19 of the best places to do engagement sessions in Columbia, South Carolina. Well, no one else was covering this topic, right? Like it was maybe one or two other posts out there had 3 or 4 suggestions, but I did 19. And I'm like, now, anytime someone asks, I can just give them this. But guess what? That page started ranking so well because I found a need that a lot of people have. And that it covered a wide range of queries, a lot of things that people are searching for: where to take pictures, where to take engagement pictures, where to do outdoor engagement sessions, all of these things that people are searching. That post did a really good job of covering that. So as far as like, when I say make 4 pieces of content a year, that piece of content alone, still, that's like 3 years old on my blog, and I haven't updated it since. And I think last time I checked, it brought in 400 clicks in a month.
Oh my gosh.
Just from one piece of content. And so like,
yeah,
if you could do that kind of thing 3 times a year, imagine in 3 years, you could have, what is that? That's like 16, that's like 5,000 clicks a month. If you did that for 3 years straight and only 4 times a year.
Yeah, that's insane. That's quite a bit. That's quite a bit for sure. So my next question for you is, when it came to coming up with the 19 places to do engagement sessions, was there a reason behind 19? Because that's kind of where I get stuck, because I'll look at a piece and be like, oh, like 20 places to, get engaged in indie. And it's like, well, if I'm going to do 21, right? Yeah. And I feel like that number matters, but does it really?
It can matter. There's a lot of studies out there that are really interesting about like click-through rate psychology and whether you should use odd numbers and which numbers and this kind of stuff. I have researched some of that, and 19 I think was intentional, but it doesn't really matter. The idea, there's this technique out there in SEO called the Skyscraper Method. You could even just go Google Skyscraper SEO and you'll get an idea of what this is all about. But basically, it is, you find a piece of content out there and then you create something 10 times better. So like you're looming over them. And that was the idea for me, is like the best one out there had 3 or 5 or 7 or something. I'm like, I've got to have more than that for this to be comprehensive.
But I can't do 70.
No, there probably aren't. Well, there could be 70. That's an interesting thing, because in my group recently, I was like, what if instead of going wide, you just spent a long time going really, really deep on something? Like, what if I did find 70 places? Like I found these random parking lots and, little private or public areas that are like wooded, like just random places all over the city. And I made a blog post about each one, or one big blog post with all of them. I could literally become known as the go-to source for where to do portrait sessions or whatever in my city. I mean, that builds authority as a photographer. Other photographers are going to start emailing me and asking me questions, which might kind of get annoying after a while. But I mean, the idea is like, if other people are sending my resource to their clients, that could be really powerful. I could start getting more backlinks and all that kind of stuff. So, that's the idea. It's like, for 19, I just like wrote down everyone I could think of where I had some sort of picture to put on there. But it could be any number. I have another post that's 5 of my favorite wedding venues in Columbia, or 7. I think it's 7. But it's not very many. And it's like, that post is also doing about as well as the other post. And it's just because no one was covering that topic very well. In some cities like Indianapolis, you're probably going to have several people who have already created a venue list. But there are probably a lot of listeners out there who don't have anyone who has put out a list of places to take family sessions or engagement sessions or maternity sessions or whatever, or they haven't put out a good venue list. And you could just put a few and already be the authority.
Wow. So this obviously is a lot of work, right? There's no denying that there's a lot of work that needs to be put in for SEO, and coming up with a list of places to get married or have a portrait session, I think is probably a great place to start. But what if you are a sports or high volume photographer? Do you have any examples of what these other photographers could be posting as Cornerstone content?
Yeah, and that's a really good question I've been thinking a lot about. I've been trying to come up with examples in like every industry, and there's a large variety for anything, and it takes some creative thinking. But I'll give a few examples. So I'll start with like newborn photographers often have a really hard time. They like do the same thing in studio a lot, and they don't know what to do. There's a million ideas, but one piece of success that I've seen from one studio is that they did cake smash sessions at 1 year. And this may be that people are like, well, I'm a newborn, I don't do that. But if you do something like that, I had one client who in a major metro ranked in the first position for cake smash sessions and started getting maybe 30 inquiries a week from just cake smash sessions.
Wow.
Because for some reason, a lot of people were searching for it in that city. And so, it's like sometimes there are things that are a tangent of what you do. Now, it could be that it's not that direct. If you're like a high school senior photographer, one of the things that I would do if I were a senior photographer, because there's only so much you can cover, like locations to do senior sessions, what to wear to a senior session, how to prepare for your senior session, when should you do your senior, you get those kinds of questions, right? But once you've done all that, what do you do next? Well, I mean, think about the things that are important to people who are in high school and think about how you can write something that's relevant to local high school seniors. And one example, or their families, right? So one example I thought of a long time ago, and I actually did a little bit of work around it and started to see a lot of results really quickly, was I put up on my website, again, this was a really long time ago, but I put a high school football schedule for my region. So like all the major high schools in my area, I put up the football schedule on a page. You would not believe how many people were searching for a high school football schedule.
Really?
It was insane. But like no one would think of that on their photography site. Like, right? You wouldn't think I need to put the football schedule up, but you could, even though it's already posted somewhere else, put some pictures to games you've been to, show that you care about the things that they care about, the community. There's so many other examples like that where you just have to get creative. So that's the thing I would do with volume sports or high school seniors. I'd start to think about, what do these people care about that's related to what I do, and how can I cover something that people are searching for?
Hey guys, Raymond here. I just wanted to take a quick break from today's chat to let you know that you are listening to the free version of this interview. And if you like what you hear from today's guest, you can hear the full interview and get access to the entire back catalog of past interviews by simply becoming a premium member of the podcast for just $10 a month by signing up over at patreon.com/beginner photography podcast. And if you're driving, well, no worries. The link is on our homepage at beginnerphotographypodcast.com also. So sign up now, and if it's not everything that you hoped it to be, no worries. Cancel anytime within the first 30 days, and I will happily give you your money back. That's it. I appreciate you all. I hope to see you on the inside.
That would be the strategy I would be pursuing right now if I were still doing wedding photography.
Done. That's what I'm going to do, Cory. That was a great idea. Great idea. And suddenly, it's like I already kind of put in the work on the back end to put everything together. And now just putting it all together like you just did right there made so much more sense and alleviates a lot of that workload as well. So thank you for sharing that. I definitely got my money's worth out of this interview today. So let's kind of move on now. You've been doing SEO for years, right? You were also a photographer, like we talked about. So I think that you are the perfect person to ask this question specifically, especially because I saw it in your brief that you sent over. What kind of content does Google want to see specifically from photographers? Because one of the ideas that I had was pictures, like we talked about in the beginning. Post a lot of pictures, right? Does Google want to see pictures? Do they want to see text? Do they want to see video? What kind of content does Google want tailored to photographers?
Yeah. So the best way to answer your question is to tell you that you need to go and do a Google search to figure that out, because it's going to vary per query. So whenever I type in best places to do engagement sessions, I'm probably going to get an answer box, and it probably has a list of entities in it. That's something that's very different than if I type in wedding photographer Columbia SC, because I'm probably going to get a map pack, and it's probably going to have locations from Google My Business. I might get a set of pictures in that search results. I might get a video carousel in those search results. You need to go and look and see what kind of SERP features Google is using, and that will give you a huge clue into what type of content they want to display for that. And then another thing I would do is look and see, our home pages ranking mostly, our internal pages ranking mostly. So like just /family, for example, on your site, or our blog post ranking mostly. You'll find some queries where only blog posts are shown, right? So if they're like really informational or research based in nature, Google really leans towards showing blog posts with lots of text content. Whereas for photographers, people are like, you need more text, you need more text. Yes, you do probably need more text. Most photographers do. But the idea is that the text should serve the intent of someone who's trying to complete a certain task. So if I'm searching for Indianapolis wedding photographer, I'm looking to hire a local business in Indianapolis who photographs weddings, right? So what are all the signals that I can send to Google to say, I'm a local business? Well, you got Google My Business set up. You've got an address in the city if possible. You've got a phone number with the right area code. You've got photos that include landmarks in that city. You've got like all these things that kind of come together. You keep building out from that. You have blog posts that mention specific things that are really what Indianapolis is known for. If you have all of that, you start to become locally relevant. You start to become known as a business by having like, this is the tricky part for photographers. Google My Business with a physical address makes a big difference in showing up for these kinds of local queries. And a lot of people don't have that. It's a home address. They don't have a studio. They just don't want to show their home address, whatever. And so I know that's getting into a lot of a different topic, but the idea here is that you have to figure out what's important to a particular query. And when it comes to ranking for Indianapolis wedding photographer, it's going to be a different set of factors that Google is weighing than whenever it comes to ranking for best places to have your wedding makeup done in Indianapolis.
Right.
They're probably going to show very different content for those two queries.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right.
It's probably going to be blog posts in that case. But, if I typed in where to have my makeup done for my wedding in Indianapolis, it's a really long thing. But, you get the idea. It's something like that versus wedding makeup inspiration. You see how those two are also going to have two very different intents. The person who typed in inspiration, they absolutely want to see more pictures, right? And so if you typed in wedding makeup inspiration Indianapolis, you're probably going to, I haven't done it, but you're probably going to get a larger image set on the organic search. So if you just do a regular Google search, you're probably going to get multiple rows of image results there. And that's how to tell you, like, you need to have a page that has some strong images that are similar to the ones shown in the image reel. That's the kind of thing people don't necessarily think about. If I go to Google and I type in, that's such a random example, but I'm going to use it again, like wedding makeup inspiration Indianapolis, and I see 10 images that show up there, and they're all close-ups of a bride's face, every single one of them. And I'm trying to optimize with my alt text and my page and all this stuff that's like farther away, full body shots, something like that. I'm missing the mark because Google knows I need to have a full face in this photo. Google's image recognition these days is insanely good. So they're going to look for patterns, and the machines are doing this, by the way. It's not like humans. So,
right, yeah.
So the machines can see close-up of a face, close-up of a face, close-up of a face. And if yours isn't a close-up of a face, they're going to be like, doesn't fit. And that's the kind of thing, like if you're asking what kind of content does Google want to see, typically right now, one of the best things you can do is look at the current body of content that's ranking and do something that's either A, similar to that, or B, very different than that serves an intent that is there that Google just hasn't started to serve yet.
I gotcha. This is a lot, right? Yeah. I knew I knew before this interview that it was going to be a really hard interview for three reasons. One of them is that there's no one size fits all.
No.
Right. The second one is that SEO is it's like it can't be personalized, this interview right here.
Yeah.
And the last one is that SEO is always changing, right? So for those three reasons, I knew that this was going to be a hard interview, but I know that I picked up a lot of great information here, and I think that you shared a lot of great information that beginners are going to understand as well. And if they don't, it's going to inspire them to learn more, I hope. I think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I would love to hear people come into your group and ask, like, okay, you talked a lot about wedding examples, but you didn't use a single boudoir example. Can you give some of those? I'd be happy to answer those kinds of questions.
So you heard it. Cory's already in the group, so just go ahead and come into the group and ask those questions. But I want to know, before I let you go, I want to know, since you teach SEO to photographers, you've been a photographer, what do you think is the hardest thing about SEO for photographers to grasp, to understand?
I think that's a really good question. I think that photographers usually just think about the basics, like keywords, putting in keywords and tags. And people are always asking me, like, can you just do my SEO for me? And they think I'm going to like go into the back end and do some like advanced stuff and add some random tags to things, and that's going to make them rank. And I think that they're really missing the entire point altogether. I've tried to talk about it quite a few times here, but the entire point of SEO is to figure out what people are searching for and to serve that, the intent behind that search. Whenever I go and type something into Google, what do I actually want to do? What do I actually want to know? If I want to know how much does it cost to hire an Indianapolis wedding photographer, you need to include something about pricing on that page, or you're not answering the intent behind the search. And I think that the other big thing that really comes with a lot of photographers is they have multiple things they're trying to target. They're trying to target wedding photography and family photography and newborn photography, and organizing their site in a way that doesn't put all of that onto one page, but makes their internal pages strong enough to rank for those terms. It can be mind-boggling even for me to come up with structures for people that they can follow. I think that's one of the things that it's tough. It's tough to come up with something that really works well for the type of client that you're trying to attract and the way that you want to show your work, but also makes technical sense to a search engine and gives the signals that they need to see. So those are the hardest things. People just miss the point and they think it's about tags and keywords. And of course that's part of it, but it's not the main point. And then site structure just being completely off.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Even though I learned a lot from this interview, I know that I still need help when it comes to SEO. I'm sure that people listening still need help when it comes to SEO. So Cory, wrap this up. Where can they find you online and get help if they need it?
Yeah, so website is fuelyourphotos.com. I have a really active Facebook group. Fuel Your Photos is the name of it. You can probably find it by searching. And I have, if you go to the website, fuelyourphotos.com, I have a tab for services. I have a tab for a course that's launching here in a few weeks. So a lot of stuff there on the website and in the group.
Perfect. Cory, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to hear everybody's response, and I know that there's going to be some questions for you in the Facebook group, so look out for that. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now, I totally understand, right? I think as a beginner, you know that you probably should have a website, but you don't exactly know what to do with that website. And now hearing a lot of terms that maybe you haven't heard before can feel like a lot. But I really hope that you didn't tune out, because if you listen to Cory's message, what he said is invaluable, right? He got into some of the technicals, but some of the bigger picture ideas, and this was definitely my biggest takeaway, right? When I first started blogging, I thought that each blog post was kind of like its own entity, right? It was its own thing. That's it. I made it. It's done. That's its thing. Whatever happens to it, happens to it. I was no longer in control of its destiny. That was the thing, right? But what Cory shared, and he really changed, my perspective on things, is think about if Google came to you and said, hey, Raymond, what's the one piece of content that you want us to show of yours if somebody comes looking for wedding photography or engagement photography? And suddenly it's like, wow, well, there's a lot of information. It's not just one blog post. If somebody's searching for wedding photography in Indianapolis, I don't want them to see a guide to getting, a style guide. Maybe that would help some of them. If that's what they're searching for, that's what I want them to find. But if they're searching for like wedding photography or engagement photography in Indianapolis, I want to show them a lot more information. And creating one post, one piece of cornerstone content that is like, you said you're engaged. Now it's time to start planning your engagement session. First thing that you need to do is figure out, where you're gonna have your engagement session. And if you're looking for ideas, here's my other blog post, a million, different locations around Indianapolis to have your engagement photos. And now once you picked your location, now you got to think about, what you're going to wear. So here's my styling guide for engagement photos in Indianapolis for the winter, the summer, the fall, the autumn, whatever it is. And then once you pick out that, now you got to figure out if you want, what sorts of props you want, what sorts of photos you want, and then give information on that as well. And suddenly this one article, which is just bullet points, right? It's like pick a location, figure out what you're going to wear, and then any additionals, is now so much more because it's linked to other blog posts on my site that they can find helpful information. And that changed the way that I think about my blog. And Cory, for that, I cannot thank you enough. Honestly, I can't. I've been working feverishly ever since our interview to kind of change up things on my website to ensure that well, I guess not to ensure, I guess that's the wrong word, but like to kind of fit this mold that Google is looking for, because not even just Google, just brides, right? Like it makes sense if you put out a blog post that's like, hey, you need to pick a location, you need to figure out what you're going to wear, you need to figure out all the extras, and then that's it. You didn't give any of that extra info, like you didn't link to, like you have those blog posts, but you didn't link to them. Suddenly you're not thinking about the visitor. You're thinking about, yourself. You're just hoping for more website clicks, and that's it. But linking those other blogs is helpful to them, and that is what is obviously most important. So, Cory, again, thank you so much for coming on. And if you have any questions for Cory, if you're listening and you have any questions for Cory, like Cory said at the end of the interview there, he will be in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, which if you're in it right now, you're good. You're set. You can go ahead and ask away. But if you're not in it, again, just search Google for Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. Maybe you don't need the word Facebook group in there, but did I say search Google for a Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group? I wonder if that works. Anyway, try that. And if it doesn't, go to Facebook and search Beginner Photography Podcast. Feel free to join. Answer 3 questions. That's it. I just need to confirm that you're human and that you really want to be in the group. And if you don't answer those 3 questions, you're not getting in. No ifs, ands, or buts. Sorry about you. Okay, so that is it for this week. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to focus on yourself. And I want you to stay safe. All right? That's it. Love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.